Hey guys, welcome to the last part of Unit 7 for my 6th grade Heritage Studies Ancient Civ class. This is going to be part 4 of Unit 7, the last part of medieval Europe and Japan. There will be a mini quiz posted at the end of this, so make sure you complete that and submit that. But we'll get there here in a second. So where we left off with Charlemagne as the most influential, most important ruler in, at least in Middle Europe in the medieval times, probably in all of Europe for medieval times. We talk about how his son split up his empire between his 3 grandsons, and now we're going to get into the next part of the story. As Charlemagne's grandsons continue to fight amongst themselves, the empires grow weak and vulnerable to attack, especially from the area known as Scandinavia, now split up into Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. They are known as the men from the north, Norsemen, or as we call them now, Vikings. Using boats and small raiding parties, the Vikings raided defenseless towns throughout Europe. In the year 911, a king in the north of France offered the Vikings the land of Normandy in France in exchange for peace, and the Vikings would eventually settle there, and they would become known as the Normans. That's important, and remember that because that's going to come back up in a big way. And there's the area of Normandy in the north of France. Medieval feudalism. So you remember at the beginning of this unit we talked about Japanese feudalism. We'll do a little compare-contrast with medieval feudalism. With no strong leader or central government for protection, Europe fell into a time of feudalism, where wealthy landowners would offer protection in exchange for service. Kings would give lands called fiefs to lords, who would then give part of the land to different vassals, who could then divide up their land between lesser vassals, and so on. Knights were a different kind of vassal assigned to protect lords, artisans, and peasants alike. The artisans, farmers, and merchants, aka freemen, supported the nobles, and the peasants did all of the hard labor, mostly in growing food. So you got another social pyramid here. So up at the top, Pope, Church, God. The Pope is the earthly representation of Christ in many interpretations. So they're all kind of on unified or in uniform status with one another. And then you got the king, nobles, lords, knights, other vassals, merchants, farmers, tradesmen, craftsmen, peasants, and serfs. And this arrows off to the side show service. It shows protection going on the way down. Knights. Any nobleman could become a knight, and they had to start as a page at age 7, requiring them to live in another noble's castle and learn horsemanship and fighting skills. At age 14, the boy became a squire, joining his master and other knights in battles, hunts, and continuing to learn how to fight. At age 21, and after this training, a boy could become a knight after a long religious ceremony and pledging loyalty to his master. If there were no real battles to fight, a group of knights threw tournaments and jousting competitions for practice, and they would use their coat of arms from their family crest for their identification, kind of like their home team colors. And each knight lived by a code called chivalry, which is very synonymous with the Japanese samurai tradition of Bushido, the way of the warrior. So as a page, some of the things they would do. As a squire, and then finally as a knight. Example of a coat of arms. Life on the manor system, as designed by Charlemagne, and then modified later on, and fit very well into the feudalistic mindset. A huge farm, complete with woods, ponds, fields, little villages for peasants, big castle for the lords, and a church. Peasants, also known as serfs, they rented and worked the lord's land for protection and part of the food that they grew. The freemen, the artisans, were allowed to move from the manor, but serfs were bound to the same land all their lives unless they could save up enough money to pay the lord and leave. These manors kind of acted like little cities. They're totally self-sufficient, which means they provided everything that they need. Their own food, their own artisans, their own knights, little military services for protection. They had their own churches for religious services. They were able to really operate without interacting a whole lot with the people around them, except if they wanted to. Got your serfs or peasants. Another feudal pyramid of power. This one's a little more childish. So I told you to remember from the last video, remember the Normans. They were former Vikings that had settled down in the northern part of France. The Battle of Hastings in 1066. The King of England died without an apparent heir to the throne, and both Harold Godwinson, who's already in England, and William of Normandy, who's in Normandy, north of France, claimed the throne. They met in battle near the town of Hastings in England, and thousands of soldiers fought on either side. Eventually, William's army broke through Harold's line, killed Harold, and drove his army back. William, from that point on, known as William the Conqueror, became the King of England and started what is known as the Norman line of kings in 1066. And that is actually the last time that Britain has been successfully invaded by an outside force. So, a couple pictures of William the Conqueror. So all of the red area is going to be in possession of William I by the time he gets done with his conquering. Now let's pick up with the Norman line of kings. Henry II, William's great-grandson, came to power in 1154 and established England's first official and statewide legal system. Before this time, many accused people had to go through trial by ordeal, which is usually either trial by combat. They had to fight one another in order to prove they're innocent. If they won, then obviously they were innocent. If they lost, well, they were usually dead, so it didn't really matter anyway. There are all sorts of other tests as well to prove that they were innocent. Now you have trial by jury. Jury being a group of your peers selected from the community around you became the law of the land, and accused people were brought before a group of their peers to decide their innocence. It also used writs to instruct sheriffs how to handle other disputes, such as over land and other financial issues. There's Henry II. So go from this trial by ordeal. Here it looks like this woman, probably accused of witchcraft, is going to be dunked underwater. See how long she can hold her breath. If she can hold her breath and survive, she's probably a witch, and she's going to be killed anyway. If not, she'll be dead, but she'll be found innocent. One of those weird things to trial by jury, with lawyers and judges, all the things we like to watch on the TV today. The Magna Carta. In 1199, King John, Henry's youngest son, becomes king, and he used his power to tax the people heavily, becoming extremely unpopular. Eventually, people grew sick of this. After determining in 1215 that John had abused the rights of the people, the nobles in the area revolted against him and forced him at sword point to sign the Magna Carta, which began to limit the king's power to do whatever he wanted. This document is important in world history because it is the first document that guarantees basic human rights to everyone, greatly influenced the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, which are the foundational documents in United States history. No other time in history had that happen, had a king actually agreed to limit his own power for the sake of everyone around him. The castle. By the thousands AD, the castle became very commonplace as residence for kings and lords and as military fortresses. The king or lord and his family lived in the keep, the safest, most fortified part of the castle, while servants usually slept in the rooms that they worked in. Castles were normally cold and dark. Walls are going to be painted and hung up with torches and tapestries, which are big woven pieces of art, to brighten passages and warm the place up. In order to keep out attackers, castles had huge walls and towers, as well as drawbridges, moats, gatehouses for protection. Attackers tried to circumvent this by using battering rams, siege towers, tunnels, and fire in order to get in. Examples of some of the more famous castles that are still standing. What it looked like on the inside. So this part, which is like a double-walled section right here, would be the keep. That would be the most safest part of the castle. The safest part of the castle, that would be where the king or the lord and his family would stay. The decline of feudalism. The Crusades did a lot to weaken the idea of feudalism, as they were expensive, and many serfs who went to fight either died or just never came back. By the 1500s, most of the nations of Europe had central governments that were directly led by kings, And many people left the country to move to find work in the cities and towns, leaving fewer people to work on farms on the manors. Seems like someone has hacked onto my page and wrote, "Hello there, my name is Bob." That's not important. Don't just forget about that. To work the farms on the manors. That's funny. By the 1500s, this is what most of Europe and the surrounding area looked like. MiniQuiz, guys. So you can either, like I have told you before, write down the answers on a sheet of paper, take a picture, send it through Remind or the homework drop or email. You can, I'm attaching this document or document that has these questions on it into the supporting documents on RunWeb lesson plans. You can print that out, write on it. You can write down the answers there, or you can go to the online testing link through the RunWeb family portal and take the test or take the quiz on the day that you finish this as well. That will be multiple choice. Just make sure you do it and submit it to me because it will be graded. Guys, that's it. I appreciate you guys very much for paying attention, and I will talk to you guys soon. Hopefully things get back to normal very quickly.